Revealed, abandoned autistic son creates $5.7 million app, leading to unexpected demands from his mother. Daniel sat in the corner of a bustling cafe, vibrant chatter swirling around him like a tempest. Morning patrons sipped their coffee, buried in conversations about the latest tech news. But his attention was fixated on his phone, where a notification blinked ominously. It was a name he hadn't spoken about in years, an echo from a past that felt too heavy to lift. His breath caught, a blend of confusion and rage bubbling up as he read the message from his mother, demanding a share of his newfound success. How could she? His mother had walked out on him, leaving a void he had painstakingly filled with lines of code and dreams of innovation. His heart thudded painfully in his chest, memories swirling a younger Daniel, feeling abandoned and confused, desperately seeking her love, now flooded with the anger of betrayal. She had given up on him, yet now she wanted in, seeking a slice of the life he had fought so hard to carve out. He returned to the present, scanning the cafe filled with laughter and ambition, but all he felt was a hollow pit in his stomach. The app he developed was a beacon of hope and connection for many like him, now it just felt like bait. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. He drummed his fingers against the table, the rhythm snapping him into focus. This was a test of his resolve, of his worth. How would Roger, his mentor, advise him? The seasoned entrepreneur had seen something in Daniel, had nurtured his raw talent, and often spoke about integrity, about success being more than just money. It was about reflecting values. As a child, Daniel yearned for his mother's acknowledgement. Now, the thought of giving in felt like an erasure of everything he had built for himself and others. He leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of uncertainty anchoring his thoughts. Each swirl of confusion deepened his sense of isolation. The warmth of the cafe could not thaw the chill that settled in his bones. He could hear his childhood friends' laughter in a distant memory, a stark reminder of loyalty that had never wavered. They had stood by him when he faced the world alone, and now, was he to betray their trust by entertaining a woman who had left him to navigate his own storms? Pain surged through his chest, questioning if forgiveness was an act of strength or weakness. Was his mother's call a lifeline or a chain meant to hold him down? The duality of yearning for connection against the backdrop of betrayal spun in his mind, blurring the edges of what he believed he wanted. As he prepared for the inevitable confrontation, Daniel's heart felt heavier, a mix of hope and hurt tightening his throat. What would it mean to meet her again? Was there a chance for healing, or would this moment only deepen scars he had fought so hard to transform into victories? He had to decide. The clock ticked on, and each tick seemed louder, surrounding him in anticipation, weighty with the expectations of the choices he was about to make. The precipice stretched before him, every possibility promising change, but at what cost? Daniel stared blankly at the screen, the stark brightness reflecting his internal chaos. How could he even begin to process the notion of his mother wanting to be part of his life now? A cold sweat clung to his brow as he considered his next steps. The cafe hummed around him, excitement and ambition pervaded the air, yet he felt detached, like an observer of his own life. He forced himself into action, tapping a response to his mother. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but words eluded him. What could he say? A torrent of emotions raged within him, anger, betrayal, the faintest flicker of hope for understanding. He closed his eyes, envisioning Roger's steady presence beside him, urging clarity and reason amidst the storm. Don't let the past dictate your future, he recalled Roger advising him during moments of doubt. Daniel had always admired that about his mentor, Roger's ability to see through the fog of emotions and find a path forward. What would it take for Daniel to honor that ethos? To carve a future untainted by his mother's shadow, while still acknowledging the existence of that past? He pictured the app, the one he had nurtured with all his heart, not just for himself, but for countless others who felt lost. It represented resilience, a triumph over adversity, signaling that even those who are regarded as different can find their voice. Seconds turned to minutes, and a heaviness enveloped him as he considered the implications of inviting her back into his life, into this space he had fought so fiercely to define. With purpose, he began to type. I'm not interested in sharing my success with you. There. It felt bracing, like stepping into an icy lake. A reminder of the value of his choices, of the friendships he had built, and those who stood by him through thick and thin. But just as quickly, doubts crept in. Was it too harsh? He lingered on the backspace key, caught in the quagmire of guilt and the deep-seated desire for any acceptance from her. Taking a deep breath, he decided to put the phone down for a moment. Instead, he focused on the cafe around him, grounding himself in the present. He watched a barista expertly pour lattes while friends shared laughs over pastries. These ordinary yet profound moments reminded him of the path he had walked, the difficulties he had encountered, and the triumphs that now felt precariously perched atop the teetering tower of his emotions. As the weight of his decision loomed larger, another thought crashed over him like a wave. What if this meeting could serve another purpose? What if, instead of letting her in solely for her own benefit, he used this as an opportunity to assert his own boundaries? To reclaim control over his narrative? Could this confrontation lead to the closure he needed? The weight shifted within him, tentative but promising. Before he could talk himself out of it, he picked up his phone once more, fingers moving swiftly. If you want to talk, it needs to be on my terms. Even that felt monumental. The path he was carving was distinctly his own, born of willpower and integrity. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a declaration of independence. Each character solidified his resolve further. Daniel sent the message and, for the first time in what felt like ages, let out a deep breath. His phone buzzed immediately in response, and he steeled himself for the wave that was coming. That visceral mixture of dread and anticipation surged yet again within him as he realized the confrontation he had been avoiding was now approaching fast. The time had come to face the one person whose absence had shaped so much of his life. Daniel stood up, his heart racing. It was now or never. What would he say when they finally faced each other? How could he ensure that history did not repeat itself? As the door swung open, letting in a cool breeze, he prepared for what lay ahead. Little did he know, the encounter would force him not only to confront his past but to reveal a strength he had never fully acknowledged within himself. Daniel paced outside the cafe, the cool breeze carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries, but he couldn't appreciate it. Anxiety twisted in his stomach, the anticipation of his mother's arrival invading his mind. He found an empty bench, forcing himself to sit. This was the conversation that could redefine everything he thought he understood about family, boundaries, and his own worth. With every tick of his watch, sweat dripped down his temples. He thought of the app, the successful app, and how far he had come. It felt like building a fortress of bricks only to have someone knock insistently at the front gate, demanding entry. Digging his fingers into the armrest of the bench, he questioned whether he was equipped to handle this meeting. Just last week, he had finally told himself he wouldn't allow anyone to undermine the work he had done, the life he had built. Yet the prospect of seeing her, the woman who had left him feeling unworthy for so long, threatened his resolve. Moments later, he spotted her from afar, her figure both familiar and foreign. Time and absence had etched changes into her face, but the tension remained. The energy that had once been her dismissiveness now flickered with a desperate hope. She approached, an unexpected softness in her expression, and his heartbeat quickened. "Daniel," she said, stopping a few feet from him. There was hesitation in her voice, a vulnerability that unnerved him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. Let's just keep this straightforward," he replied, his voice steady despite the internal storm. He couldn't afford to yield to whichever wave of emotion threatened to crash over him. An awkward silence stretched between them, and he could feel the weight of years passing as they regarded one another. She cleared her throat, the sound sharp against the soft murmur of the world around them. "I just wanted to talk about where we left off." "I know it's been years," he cut her off, impatience rising in him. Years of silence don't just disappear with a simple conversation. "You left. You walked away when I needed you the most." His tone was fierce, but his heart trembled beneath the surface. Her eyes glistened, a reaction that threatened to pull him back into empathy. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a good mother. But I want to understand you now. I want to be part of your life. He stared at her, incredulity mingling with indignation. And what? Just pick up like nothing happened? The boundaries he had so carefully nurtured felt at risk of collapsing. Part of my life is built on wanting to be what you didn't allow me to be. Please, let me in. I acknowledge my mistakes, and I'm trying to fix them, she pleaded, stepping closer, her eyes searching for understanding. Something shifted within him, an unsettling mixture of anger and a deeply ingrained desire for acceptance warred in his chest. He was not that young boy pleading for approval anymore. He was a man living out his dreams, crafted from determination and fortitude. Yes, you've made mistakes, he said, confronting her gaze head-on. But this is where it stops. You're not here to claim any part of my success. You want to know me? Fine. But understand this, it's my terms now, and it won't be easy. Her expression faltered slightly, but he pressed on. You have to show me you're willing to fight for this. Actions, not words. As he spoke, he realized that this moment was not merely about reconciling with her. It was about reclaiming his narrative, emphasizing his journey rather than allowing her to shape it. The parameters were being redrawn, and for the first time, the choice felt entirely in his hands. But there was still something deep inside him that quaked with uncertainty. Would she commit to the labor it took to mend their bond, or was he merely a conduit for her guilt? As her silence settled around them like a choking fog, Daniel braced himself for the answer. I can try. I will try, she finally said, but the moment was tinged with something ambivalent, a challenge as much as a promise. He exhaled sharply. Would a commitment even matter if her actions didn't follow? In that moment, the stakes crystallized. This would either surge him into empowerment or drag him down into chaotic cycles of the past. Then show me, he said quietly, allowing a part of himself to step forward. The next time we meet, I want to see that you mean it. But the question echoed in his mind. Would this decision forge the connection he longed for or simply deepen the chasm of disappointment? The tension hung palpably as he awaited her response, realizing it would either cement his future or test the boundaries of his newly defined self. Daniel stepped away from the cafe, his chest tightening with the weight of their fraught exchange. Everything he had meticulously built in his life clashed violently with the remnants of his fractured relationship with her. Each footfall grew heavier as he navigated the bustling street, the sounds of laughter and conversations swirling around him, a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere he had just left. The vibrant world around him felt almost surreal, a reminder of how life continued regardless of his internal turmoil. In that moment, Daniel realized he needed to confront the unyielding tension he felt within himself. There was a shift, an inflection point in his journey, where he could either remain the passive recipient of fate or take an active role in shaping his future. He entered his small but organized office, adorned with accolades of his success, pictures of his launch event, a framed article about his app, and a personal note from an investor praising his vision. This was more than a workspace, it was a testament to his perseverance. As he settled at his desk, he felt a surge of determination. He had transformed obstacles into opportunities. But how could he mend the elicited uncertainty woven through their conversation? Taking a deep breath, he opened his laptop, the evident familiarity of the screen grounding him in his own reality. He dove into his work, immersing himself in features for his app that had begun to garner attention. The rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the keyboard cocooned him in comfort, a reassuring escape from emotional upheaval. Each line of code he wrote reinforced the notion that he was an architect of his own dreams, not a byproduct of his mother's past decisions. But as he worked, thoughts of her resurfaced, unbidden. He found himself grappling with her fragile plea for connection. Could he allow vulnerability into his life? He had spent years constructing layers of strength, but was any of it solid enough to withstand the taste of reconciliation? Scanning his mind, he remembered the late nights spent researching and developing his app. The brilliance of combining logic with creativity had become his sanctuary. Yet now, the notion of emotional openness felt like a double-edged sword, sharp and threatening. There was a part of him that wanted to cast aside past grievances and forge a new relationship. But risking disappointment again gnawed at him, threatening to unravel the very fabric of his success. As daylight faded, Daniel resolved to draft a plan. If they were going to build something new, it would require structure much like the code he worked with daily. He mapped out his expectations, drawing boundaries while leaving room for flexibility. In his heart, he questioned whether he could guide the relationship without succumbing to the emotional chaos that had once characterized their interactions. By the time night enveloped the city, a budding conviction settled in him. Would he step into the unknown? It was time to prepare for their next meeting. There had to be criteria and accountability for the trust he would grant her. But doubt lingered still. Would he be able to establish those boundaries without falling back into the past's deep waters? He felt the inkling of fear rise within him but silenced it with a firm resolve. Tomorrow's meeting would not just be a moment of rekindling, this would signify a new chapter for both of them. The next day dawned bright, yet he couldn't escape the tangle of nerves weaving through him. As he prepared to face her again, a thought echoed in his mind. Maybe the hardest part of growth wasn't simply establishing walls but daring to open new avenues for connection. His phone buzzed with an incoming message, disrupting his deepening resolve. Panic flickered across his face. Was it her? He snatched it from the table, his heart racing. A single text read, "I'm ready to meet again, but there's something important I need to share." Biting his lip, Daniel felt a fall of dread as he wondered, was this the weight of a new revelation, or would it bear the burden of more disappointment? The stakes were higher now, and each second caught him in agonizing anticipation. Would he be prepared to confront whatever waited on the other side of that meeting? The morning air was tense as Daniel paced his living room, rehearsing different scenarios in his mind. Today felt monumental, a precipice that could either lead to renewed connection or further estrangement. He glanced at the clock, each ticking second amplifying his anxiety. He was far too aware that this meeting wasn't just a conversation, it was an evaluation of everything he hadn't truly confronted before. Stepping out into the sunlit city felt surreal, as if he were a character in a film where the stakes couldn't be more personal. Each face in the crowd seemed blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing in his heart. The cafe where they agreed to meet appeared, a small island of solace amid the bustling thoroughfare. His plan was simple, even structured, yet the weight of unspoken words loomed large. As he settled at a table with a clear view of the entrance, he felt a swell of preparation commingling with apprehension. He crafted a stable outline for their interaction, what to discuss, when to share memories, and how to frame his expectations, but the truth was, no guidelines could fully prepare him for the unpredictability of human emotions. Moments felt stretched thin as he awaited her arrival. To distract himself, he noticed a couple at a nearby table sharing laughter over steaming cups of coffee, a stark reminder of connections he longed for. He pushed back the bitterness that rose within him, forcing his attention back to the task at hand, the blank notepad before him awaiting his resolve. And then she entered, the light shifting in the cafe as if acknowledging her presence. Their eyes locked for an instant, and he felt a wave of mixed emotions, nostalgia intertwined with caution. As she approached, the nervous smile on her face hinted at vulnerability. It mirrored the very essence of what he had anticipated yet feared. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, gently sliding into the seat across from him. Her voice held a softness that surprised him. It felt like an olive branch rather than an invitation to argument. "Of course," he replied, forcing himself to maintain steady composure. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our last conversation." Her eyes narrowed slightly in curiosity, and he could sense the tension simmering beneath her calm exterior. "I have to be honest," she interjected, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've done a lot of reflecting too. And I know I hurt you, Daniel. I wasn't there when you needed me, and I can't undo that." He took a deep breath, his instinct to recoil battling against his desire for understanding. "We can't rewrite the past, but we can talk about how to move forward." Tension still hung in the air, thick and palpable, as she shifted in her seat, preparing to reveal something he sensed might alter the trajectory of their conversation. "I've been trying to figure out how to make amends, but it's more complicated than I imagined. There's something you need to know, something regarding your father." The words hit him like a jolt. Memories he had buried deep rose to the forefront, colliding with the reality of their situation. "How can you still talk about him now? After all this time?" he asked, a mix of disbelief and anger piercing through his apprehension. "It's not what you think. Please, just let me explain." Daniel's heart raced as her eyes filled with emotion, hinting that the revelations ahead could deliver a powerful punch, one that might challenge everything he thought he knew or believed. Would he be able to navigate this revelation, or was he on the verge of another emotional collapse? As she leaned forward, words poised on the edge of her lips, he pondered whether this moment would fracture his burgeoning sense of self or propel him toward a deeper understanding of their muted history. The impending confession loomed large between them, heavy with potential, a moment that could either shatter their fragile reconnection or bind them through shared truths. Daniel felt the air grow thick with tension as he processed her words. His mind was racing, unable to comprehend the implications of her next statement. Scraps of their past began to reassemble in his mind, memories of whispered conversations and fleeting moments that had suddenly taken on new meaning. "Please," he urged, "just tell me what you mean about my father." With a shaky breath, she searched his eyes, weighing the gravity of what lay between them. "I can only imagine the things you've been told, the things you've come to believe. But the truth is, your father." She hesitated, grappling with the weight of her confession. "He cared more than you realize. I didn't know how to communicate that to you without complicating things further." He leaned back in his chair, a wave of disbelief washing over him. How could she say that? From his earliest memories, Daniel's perception of his father had been shrouded in neglect, absence, and a plethora of unanswered questions. Most of all, how could she possibly bring this up now, after everything that had transpired? "And now you choose to share this," he snapped, the edge in his voice sharper than intended. "Why now? Why after all this time?" "I know it seems like too little, too late," she replied with sadness lining her features. "But I had to know how to frame it. I've learned more about the man you called your father in our time apart than I ever did when we were together. I wanted to protect you from the pain, and in doing so, I ended up hurting you worse than I ever imagined." The flicker of anger faded to embers as he struggled with her confession. The realization that much of his understanding of his father was built on a foundation of miscommunication was unsettling. Could any amount of explanation close the chasm that had formed between them? A chasm magnified by a misunderstanding of love and the complexities of their shared history? He rubbed the back of his neck, realizing that this confrontation was just as much about reconciling with his past as it was about understanding her role in it. "You're asking me to accept something that feels so out of reach," he said quietly, seeking clarity even as the tension escalated inside him. "I'm not asking you to forget what happened, Daniel. Just to consider the possibility that your father's love was complicated. I know how little sense that makes right now, but hearing someone else's version, one that acknowledges his struggles, may help you see the tapestry of our lives wasn't as single-threaded as it felt." She paused, her gaze firm yet unyielding. "And you, too, deserve a chance to move past this weight you carry and discover who you are without it." Her words struck a nerve, resonating deep within him. This wasn't merely a dialogue exchanging blame, it was a mirror reflecting his internal struggles. The potential for personal growth and healing lay beneath the surface of their fractured communication. "So, what do I do now?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. "How do I move forward from everything I believed?" "By asking questions, embracing the uncomfortable truths, and slowly weaving together the pieces of who you are," she answered, her voice steady yet fragile. "It's a path, not a perfect formula. But you can begin to choose for yourself." The weight of her statement hung in the air like the scent of freshly brewed coffee, simultaneously comforting yet daunting. In this moment, Daniel felt the stirrings of possibility. Perhaps understanding could break the cycle of bitterness that had held him captive for so long. As he contemplated her words, he struggled against the familiar need to shield himself, holding tighter to the walls he had constructed. He knew they had begun navigating a complex territory, where vulnerability could lead to unintended consequences. A realization crept into the corners of his mind. This unraveling could redefine more than just his relationship with her, it could illuminate the very path of self-discovery he had been avoiding. But just as he prepared to engage further, her phone buzzed, shattering the moment and drawing her attention with a look of dread. I need to take this, she said, her eyes reflecting a mix of urgency and fear as she stepped away. Left alone, Daniel pondered the crossroads before him. Would this pivotal moment inspire him to reclaim his narrative, or would he retreat in the face of newfound clarity? The ringing phone drew his mind to yet another dilemma. Would he continue to wrestle with his past, or would he seize the opportunity to forge a new reality for himself? His heart began racing at the realization that the choice was entirely his, but the fear of making the wrong choice loomed heavily. As she returned, her expression was grave, a stark contrast to the tender moment they had just shared. Daniel, we need to talk about your father, and something else that concerns us both, she said, her voice both hesitant and charged. A single question echoed in his mind. What more could she possibly reveal that might change everything, yet again? Daniel's mind whirlpooled with the weight of uncertainty as he registered her solemn demeanor. The gravity of her statement settled over him like a lead blanket. Something else? He echoed, the question heavy on his lips. The unyielding tension constricted his throat, and he felt the pulsing beat of anxiety escalate as he awaited her revelation. Yes, she replied, her voice low but charged with urgency. Your father's past, it's not just complicated, it's woven with shadows that could impact us in ways you're unprepared for. She took a step closer, effectively narrowing the space between them. There are things you need to understand about him, and about us. Daniel's instinct was to retreat, to pull back from facing whatever uncomfortable truths awaited him, yet curiosity clawed at him, tethered by an inexplicable pull toward the potential for growth. He'd spent too long grappling with the notions of neglect and absence. Was he ready to expand his understanding? Tell me, he urged, the words spilling forth, threaded with determination and unease alike. What does this have to do with me? Your father had his own battles, she admitted, her gaze faltering momentarily. He struggled with autism, and in many ways, your experience may reflect echoes of his. I tried to protect you from his complexities without realizing that running from them might entangle you in the very webs I wanted to shield you from. Visions of their family flooded his mind, his father's withdrawn presence at family gatherings, how he often glossed over Daniel's own struggles with social nuances. This new insight cracked open the closed door of understanding he thought he had sealed. You're saying, he hesitated, wrestling with the realization simmering just beneath the surface, that my father's absence, it wasn't just neglect? It was his own battle? She nodded, her eyes glistening with unspent tears, laden with the memories of struggles long buried. His illness shaped him in ways I was naive to comprehend, and I see now how it refracted into your own life. Denial offered no solutions, it only led to misunderstanding on my part, a misinterpretation of what love and support could look like. Each word she spoke triggered a barrage of emotions within him. The unresolved grief for the father he wished he'd known began to bubble up, mixing with burgeoning self-doubt over his own identity. If his father had been wrestling with autism, did that mean Daniel had inherited not just traits, but a legacy of difficulty in navigating the world? Why didn't you tell me sooner? That would have changed everything. The vulnerability in his voice surprised even him, exposing unresolved wounds. I thought I was protecting you from more pain, she said, her tone conversational yet fervent. But knowledge brings clarity, and hiding his reality only multiplied the hurt. You deserve to understand more about where you come from, even the uncomfortable parts. Daniel felt his chest tighten with the necessity for reflection. Abandoned memories started bubbling up, moments where a connection could have flourished had understanding prevailed. Suddenly, the potential for self-discovery sparked like flint against steel. I need to know more, he said, his voice gaining strength, gripping the reality that he had both a potential advantage and a generational pattern to untangle. What about my father's experiences can help me decipher my own? Her expression softened as she crossed her arms protectively. It'll take time. It's going to get complicated before making sense, but this isn't just about your father now, it's about you, and how you choose to navigate your own identity. Perhaps it's time you recorded your own experiences, sought help if you feel lost, leaned into those hidden talents I've seen. You might surprise yourself. Daniel's heart raced faster as the implications settled in. Every step forward would be a negotiation with not only his history but the pain and confusion he had carried for far too long. Caught in a moment of deep introspection, he contemplated the journey ahead. Would it lead him to embrace parts of himself he always feared? Could he break the chains of his father's legacy while forging his own path? As silence stretched between them, poised on the brink of a new chapter, a thought struck him, a tantalizing mix of fear and excitement. What if his experiences were a form of strength, a rich well from which he could draw? And just beneath that thought lay a darker question. What if, in solving his own puzzle, he began to understand the facets of others' struggles, including his father's? With a deep breath, he prepared for the next words that would kindle the flame of determination within him. Then let us begin with uncovering not just his story, but mine. As he spoke, he felt the gravity of his decision anchor him in newfound resolve. His past was no longer merely a shadow that haunted him, it was a canvas he was destined to reshape. But as he deliberated on the first steps, a phone rang again, a frantic plea disrupting the air, bearing news that could threaten to unravel everything he had just begun to piece together. Would this demand derail his journey, or could it serve as yet another opportunity for growth? Daniel fought to suppress the rising tide of anxiety as the phone's shrill ring cut sharply through the air. It felt like an unwelcome intrusion, an interruption to the moment of clarity he had just begun to grasp. He reached for the device, heartbeat thrumming in his ears, uncertain of what awaited him on the other end. Hello? His voice came out steadier than he felt, a desperate facade against the uncertainty creeping into his thoughts. Daniel, thank God. It was his mother's voice, tinged with urgency. You need to come home. It's about your father. The words hung in the air thick as fog, clouding his newfound resolve. He sensed the gravity of the situation spiraling away from his control, threatening to pull him back into the mire of confusion he had been trying to unravel. What happened? He questioned, heart racing. He's in the hospital, she replied, her voice cracking. He suffered an episode. The doctors say he is stable, but... Daniel, we need to talk about everything his past, your past. There's so much I didn't tell you. Panic coiled tightly in his chest. As much as he could sense the urgency, something gnawed at him, warning that diving into this moment could risk the fragile clarity he had begun to forge about his identity. I'll be there, he replied breathlessly, trying to catch his breath as he hung up. The drive to the hospital became a blur of thoughts, each one colliding wildly with the last. The image of his father emerging from the shadows of his memories felt slimy and tentative, much like the reality he had previously constructed about his absence. Was this what his father had always been, a figure laced with fragility, battling against inner storms that remained mostly hidden from plain sight? As he entered the hospital, sterile white walls seemed to echo the confusion within him. Daniel took a moment to collect himself. Hospitals carried their own weight of trauma, he felt it before. It was a world where one's vulnerabilities were exposed, and secrets tucked away were forced into the light. Straightening his spine and inhaling deeply, he reminded himself of his determination to navigate through the layers of his family's complexities. He approached his father's room, careful not to succumb to the flood of memories that surged forth, his father's distant gaze, the silence at family dinners, the questions left unanswered. Walking in, the sight of his father lying small and frail in the hospital bed shook the ground beneath him. The real man seemed eclipsed by years of unspoken battles, a victim to shadows he now began to understand. Dad? He said, taking a step closer. The man stirred slightly but did not respond. Daniel felt a sickening mixture of vulnerability ripple inside him, a deep yearning to connect, to break open the vault of history that had kept them apart. A nurse glanced at him, her presence grounding. He will be fine, but he needs support, especially now. I suggest speaking to him about his past, it might do you both some good. Her words struck him, igniting the fire of purpose within him once again. Was this the moment to confront the ghosts that haunted both of them? Could a shared experience of understanding forge the bridge they so desperately needed? As he settled into a chair beside the bed, he recalled his mother's words about understanding one another's struggles. Perhaps the key to his own clarity lay in reconnecting with the father he didn't truly know. He reached out and grasped his father's hand, feeling the coolness against his own. If you can hear me, he began, finding the strength in his voice, I want to know you, not just the shadows, but the light as well. Can we do that together? As uncertainty loomed just beyond his grasp, Daniel knew the conversation that had been years in the making was well overdue. It was time to peel back the layers of history, both his and his father's, and confront the specters that intertwined their lives. Yet, even as he began to speak, another part of him wondered, would his father's revelations empower him to face the identities both of them had hidden, or would it unravel him all the same? The hospital room became a breeding ground for both hope and anxiety, igniting the questions that threatened to reshape his very essence. In wrestling with the tangled dynamics of his family, would he emerge whole, or would they leave remnants of both triumph and trauma in their wake? And in that moment, the phone buzzed again in his pocket, a message that promised to upend everything he had fought to reconcile. His heart dropped as he glanced at the screen, the breath catching in his throat. What further demands awaited him now? Daniel shut his eyes tight for a fleeting moment, wrestling against the onslaught of emotions striving to break the surface. The phone vibrated insistently in his pocket, a crude reminder of the outside world, beckoning him back to a reality he hoped to escape, at least for a moment. He took a deeper breath, willing himself to focus on the man in front of him, their fragile connection hovering like a thread in the air. His father remained motionless, the steady beep of the heart monitor contrasting sharply with the chaos brewing inside him. Daniel unclenched his fists, letting go of some of the tension that had built up. He needed to be strong, not just for himself, but for the man who was fighting his own battles, now more exposed than ever. As he steadied his breath, he entered a mental state of purpose, blocking out the message demanding his attention. "What do you want from me, Dad?" The words slipped out unplanned, fueled by frustration and desperate yearning, as he found his voice again. "Why did you disappear? What happened that made you, this?" Silence thickened around them, and he felt raw, as if he had just stripped bare layers of defense he didn't know he had. It was both terrifying and liberating, challenging the boundaries of their estrangement in a way that he hoped would transform their relationship. This was a chance, no, an obligation to face the specters that had haunted them. The frail man stirred, a flicker of awareness breaking through the fog of his unconsciousness. Daniel leaned closer, his face full of muted determination. "I need to understand you, Dad. Tell me about your past. Tell me about the struggles that drove you away." A labored breath escaped his father's lips, and slowly, his eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded his gaze, but then there was something else: recognition. "Daniel?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. When did you come?" "I'm here, Dad," he replied, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. "You're in the hospital. We need to talk." The look of vulnerability that flashed across his father's face was captivating, drawing Daniel further into this newfound reality. It was a window into the life he had long resented and wanted answers from. "I failed you," his father murmured, breaking the silence of the room. I thought it was better this way. I didn't want you to see my demons." "Demons?" Daniel echoed, a flurry of emotions spinning within him. "What demons, Dad? I'm tired of living in shadows and silence. We deserve more. I deserve more." His father's gaze faltered, eyes darting away, as if contemplating the depth of his son's words. It became clear to Daniel that understanding meant confronting uncomfortable truths, diving into the dark currents of both their lives. "I never wanted you to be burdened by my past," he admitted, the tremor in his voice revealing a fissure in his stoic facade. But just as hope began to swell within him, an opening, a chance to mend their broken connection, the phone in his pocket buzzed again with a renewed urgency, pulling Daniel's focus back toward the abrupt, demanding reality of his life outside that hospital room. It buzzed persistently, as if echoing the weight of expectations that seemed to dog him like a shadow. With a reluctant sigh, he reached for the phone, wrestling with the dissonance between this moment of reconnection and whatever awaited on the screen. He could feel the fraying edges of his resolve. Would he let this distract him from what mattered most? As he unlocked the message and saw his mother's name, intense dread washed over him. "We need to talk about your future. There are decisions you need to make, Daniel," it read, encapsulating years of unresolved tension. Could he really handle the complexities of both his father's revelations and the weight of responsibilities tethered to his life? This was only the beginning of their conversation, but he could already feel the precarious balance between confronting the truth of the past and navigating the obligations of the present. He glanced back at his father, who was now watching him intently, the faintest glimmer of hope lurking in the old man's tired eyes. The room hummed with both fear and promise. Little did Daniel know he was on the precipice of revelations that would challenge his identity and the very foundation of what he thought he knew. An internal conflict brewed within him. Was he ready to face the storm he had invited? The moment of truth was at hand, a collision between past and present, and he knew he had to choose wisely. Would he allow the external demand to pull him away from the profound journey he had started, or would he find a way to navigate both realms without losing himself once more? Daniel stood in the dim light of the hospital room, the weight of two demanding realities pressing upon him. His father lay fragile yet present, an open book ready to narrate chapters of a life that had long been silent. Yet, a simple text from his mother sat in stark contrast, reasserting the enduring complexity of his familial dynamics. Taking a deep breath, he turned back to his father, whose weary eyes glimmered with the faintest hint of acknowledgement. "Let us begin," Daniel said firmly, feeling a shift within himself, a resolve that birthed from understanding and a fierce desire for clarity. "I was wrong," his father rasped, the tremor in his voice betraying emotions he'd kept hidden for too long. "I thought distancing myself would protect you from pain. But I see now it only wrought confusion." His admission struck Daniel like a sudden gust of wind, stirring up remnants of old resentments while leaving space for healing. "Dad," the silence only deepened the hurt. "You were both absent and present in my mind for so long," Daniel replied, allowing the truth to spill forth. "I felt abandoned, and now you're telling me it wasn't because you didn't care?" "No, it was my struggle. It shadowed every moment of my life," his father explained, voice trembling. "I carried it, hoping you wouldn't have to. You deserve better than the weight of my decisions." For the first time, Daniel grasped the significance of their shared burden, one linked by hereditary complexity, the runaway nature of fear festering beneath a facade of strength. "But I can't be defined by your choices," he asserted decisively. "I want to build my own identity." His father blinked, perhaps recognizing the delicacy of their moment spoke volumes. The experiences they carried didn't have to form chains but instead could act as the fuel for understanding. "Then let me help you, son," he whispered. "Together, we can navigate the labyrinth of both your life and mine." And just like that, a twinge of empathy sparked within Daniel. Perhaps this connection was an opportunity for discovery, for redefining familial legacies marred by silence. "Let us start with the truth," he encouraged, his voice echoing the courage he had cultivated throughout the years. "Tell me about your journey. Where did it all begin?" As his father began recounting stories of his youth, of battles fought, losses grieved, and lessons inadvertently passed, Daniel felt the weight of belief begin to lift. Each fragment revealed a person, not just a phantom of neglect. His father's vulnerabilities tethered proudly alongside his triumphs, encompassing the entirety of a life lived in tumult. "What I've learned is that embracing the shadows allows us to blossom into light," his father advised, lofty wisdom threaded through his frail words. "You are not a part of my past, Daniel. You are your own future." The conversation deepened, layering their exchange with nuances previously veiled. Healing unfolded slowly but deliberately, like the turning of a page toward a bright new chapter. Time seemed to unravel in their combined vulnerability, bridging gaps over the years lost to silence. But just as Daniel felt on the brink of significant transformation, the persistent buzz of his phone broke the moment, barreling through their newfound connection. He sighed, glancing at the screen once more, that pressing question hanging above. Was he prepared for the demands from his mother? The potential tug-of-war awaited him, the risk of old patterns resurfacing lingered like vapor in the air. In choosing to navigate towards newfound understanding, Daniel felt empowered. He turned to his father. "I'll answer her, but this time it's different. I won't let our pasts misguide my future," he declared resolutely. "Good. You have your own voice now. Use it," his father replied, an inkling of pride emblazoned across his features. With newfound strength rooted in their exchange, Daniel grabbed his phone, the emotion roiling in his chest demanding to be expressed. He texted his mother, "I'm ready to talk, but it will be on my terms." Each word felt liberating. Perceptions shifted as he laid down the boundary he had long hesitated to claim. Daniel returned to his father, who now watched him with a mixture of compassion and hope. "We're going to redefine what family looks like, Dad," Daniel asserted. "We will navigate this together." As the realization settled within them both, a profound sense of mutual understanding filled the air. Daniel had not only reclaimed his narrative, but he had fortified the possibility of a tangible bond with his father, one rooted in honesty and shared experience, rather than the shadows of misunderstanding. The hospital room shifted from a place of fear to one of liberation, where both generations now stood as architects, ready to rebuild. Now, for the first time, Daniel felt ready to face all that awaited him. What would become of the conversations with his mother, and how they could further carve the trajectory of his life to echo resilience and purpose rather than pain. He finally reached out, gripped his father's hand tightly. Together, they would weather whatever storms lay ahead. Empowered by transformation and understanding, Daniel gazed out the hospital window, a vivid sense of possibility blooming before him. And so, he knew deep down this was only the beginning. At that moment, the power of choice ultimately belonged to him. Now is your moment. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover this journey. Comment below your reactions and theories about this convergence. And remember, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Your support matters deeply.